So I wanted to unpack this idea of being for or against things. And I can tell you that this is one of the concepts that I fought. And what I mean by that is that many spiritual teachers or channels or whatever talk about law of attraction things, talk about how we should be, or if we want to get what we want, we should focus on what we want instead of focusing on what we don't want. And I fought this one tooth and nail because I couldn't really figure it out. I tried, and it was really just this weird concept that I couldn't do because, I wanted to make a difference in the world, but all I would see is what was wrong with the world. And it was like, oh, I want to change that. I want to change this. I want to change that. So a lot of my awakening was actually going against this or really trying to figure out how it works. And so now that I can see how the ego plays the game to skew our reality and alter our reality, I understand it really well now. And I'll try to unpack it here and see if this is helpful to people. Because a few examples have come up that have been just like absolutely clear to me. Look at my hair. So let's talk about racism. And should I be anti-racist or should I be for something else is the question. And now I totally that's a perfect example of why racism, everybody thought, or a lot of people in my circle, the people I hang around, are usually the ones that consider themselves not a racist. And so, like, when all of a sudden we've got Nazis marching in our country, we're like, oh my God, there's Nazis. We thought we took care of this problem. But it's an interesting thing as, how we've handled them. And that's part of why we don't want to be, we can choose. I don't want to say want, because we can desire whatever we want. So it's a choice. If we truly want to change the world, we need to change what we're doing because it's not working the way you want it to work. So archetypes and egoic stories, I've discovered, they intersect with each other. So if you take the personalization away and just look at it from a bigger picture without any emotion, if you can do that, that's the hard part. But even if you just look at like a Disney movie, Disney movies are famous and it's not just because they're brilliant at marketing, it's the fact that they know how to make they know how to make movies. They make movies by following the archetypal formula. And what that means is that they use archetypes are simply patterns of behavior. And you just find out which archetypes cause the most chaos and, or the idea of good versus evil or whatever. And you put those archetypes together. It's kind of like, if you had, let's say, the 101 Dalmatians, if you didn't have Cruella de Vil, she, that archetype, the movie would be boring. And so if you look at a movie just like in life, if it plays out the exact same way in our lives. And so if we're playing out, if we decide we want to be anti-racist, then it's inevitable. Like, for that story to play out, you have to have a racist. And racists have to have anti-racists. Actually, racists look for anti-racists, because anti-racists are how racists get their attention. Because nobody wants to just look at a racist, but you want to see virtue next to vice. And that could be our problem if we wanted things to die. And so if you look at what happened and what has happened, and somebody brought this up today, this idea of, well, I'm so worried because I'm seeing white nationalism. And it's, why are you seeing it? You're seeing it because there's attention being put on it. And it's actually getting exactly what it wanted. In fact, it got an endorsement from the highest office in the land, which was great recruiting material. And so what does that do? That causes more racism, and causes, so now what we do is we're actually legitimizing that racists have a position. See, the thing is that we could just say, you have no voice. And that means, that's what I said. If there was not an opposing group that had showed up in Charlotte or wherever it was, would it had made the news that it made? Would the president have been able to say there was good people on both sides of that fence? Would that be able to say that if they were just like marching on their own and we just left them alone and we didn't give them our attention? The greatest thing you can get is attention. I mean, the president, and this isn't coming from a biased perspective. In fact, if you have a biased perspective, that's exactly what I'm talking about, is just back yourself away from the elephant so you can see the elephant and how the elephant plays out. People can get influence by getting attention. And it doesn't matter the attention that they get. If it's good or bad, it doesn't matter. Because they're always, and that's exactly what he did with that group of people. Those are his people, because they're his people, maybe not, and I'm not saying that he likes those people. He can use those people to vote. I mean, you don't see those people at Mar-a-Lago, or I haven't heard that, at least, wherever he hangs out. So what used to drive me nuts was, so how do you be for things instead of against things? So if you see this madness going on, how do you pull yourself away from the madness and look at what you want? Well, I'm going to give you a perfect example of, just even me owning my own racism. I was born and raised in a very white household, a very white Catholic school. I had not had a lot of interaction with different races and different cultures. I mean, a few, like my best friend growing up was Mexican. But the point is I never thought that racism was a good idea. I was always impressed. In fact, my father used to say that it was the blacks that were the problem, or he was very racist. And I just, even as being a young kid, and I was so malleable as a young kid, I just remember thinking, that is not a smart position to take. And so I mean, from that day forward, I never considered myself a racist. And I'm not a racist. I was never a racist, but what I came to understand was, and I am working this into how you go for, instead of go against. What I discovered through my own personal journey of figuring out what was going on inside my own world, I discovered that because of my travels and my experiences, I didn't know the experiences of other races and their cultures and that sort of thing. And it wasn't that I avoided it. It's just it didn't interest me because I wasn't a part of it. So when I finally realized and learned about this thing called implicit bias, I started looking at it and going, yes, I am biased, unconsciously biased against people, and I choose things because they're white things. They're the things that I know. And it's not, I don't think that's evil. It's just unconsciousness. And so what would I say to people now to be for something? Well, most of the people that I know that really do want to change, and they want to see racism erased and that sort of thing, well, have that vision. Hold that vision of what that looks like. And the way to move towards that would be to be curious. Because the information you're getting right now about all this white nationalism is coming from a very unwise source. It's all psychologically manipulated. Things are taken out of context because it fits this narrative that we all want to hear about these racists and that sort of thing. So it doesn't matter whether the story is true or not, or how much truth is in it. If it bleeds, it leads. It's bad. So what I would recommend, or that I look at, is, and I don't have to do this anymore because I'm awake. It comes automatically. Because I don't take that's what it was. Crikey, I forgot about that. Hopefully we're good. Oh, good. We're back online. All right. So what can you do? What could somebody do if they wanted to take a different route with racism and go for racism rather than be against racism? Don't be anti-racism. Well, first of all, don't put yourself in the story. That's the simplest answer. It's really, really simple in that if you declare yourself anti-racist, you automatically need a racist in order to make your reality. Because an anti-racist it can't live in the story without a racist. And another problem with that is if we start considering ourselves an anti-racist, then we're looking for racists. And we can then skew the world to make somebody that's not racist into racism. Gosh, if that isn't present in here, jumping on anybody that's done anything in the last 30 years, and trying to shame them and shut them up and call them a racist and all that stuff, it's not helpful. And they're probably on your team is what really kicks. And that's the irony of it all. So what would you do to move forward? How do you move forward this? Be for it. Have a vision of the world that you want to see, which is just people acting like people, just being human. So how do you do that? Become deeply curious. Become deeply curious. You know how you understand people? You talk to them. And you ask them questions about their life. You get to know what their experiences are. You could literally go, I thought of this. You could just go to somebody and say, this is my truth. If you ever got into the proper situation, I wouldn't say just go on somebody in the street, but you could say, this is my situation. I was born in a white family, and I was raised in a white culture. Is there anything you can share from me from your experience of growing up in your culture that would help me understand you better? How you tick, how you operate and your culture operates, that sort of thing. And then the other part is to be curious of your own self and understand that curiosity, and I believe that this is the case, the people that will always argue that being anti-racist is the good way are probably avoiding looking at themselves. And to be curious about how you operate and how you might take some responsibility takes courage, and it takes an act of courage to do that. And so being curious is not easy. It takes an act of courage, because what somebody else might say might zing you, but you can't listen if you're zinged. So you got to figure out how to get rid of the zings. And it's interesting because already just being awake for a while, I'm already understanding how it works for everybody involved. I still have my preferences. I still want to see justice. I want to see. I'm not a pacifist. But I'm able to see the whole picture of something, and that way I can look at a situation and see where truth lies from different vantage points. And what's really interesting is that people want deeply to talk about things that are beyond the superficial, but when we continue to stay in these little tiny boxes that we're trying to put people into, it's all superficial. It's all superficial stuff. And the deeper stuff and what's going on, what's churning inside of them, they want to talk about it. The thing is that they, people just are scared. I mean, I ran into a guy and we had a conversation. I don't lead with what do you do for work. So I asked him later on in the conversation, so what do you do during the day for your occupation? And he said, and he's comfortable. And he's a super nice guy, and he got really uncomfortable. And I thought, oh my God, like, what's this guy going to tell me? And it was just a neighbor, and he's just a sweet, just a really nice guy, sweet. And he's real uncomfortable, and he goes, okay, are you pro-cop or anti-cop? And I said, I don't hold a viewpoint on it. I'm pro-justice, I'll tell you that. And he just took a deep breath, and he was like, okay. And the next thing you know, he's opening up. He's like, and you know what? I've seen videos where the cop did something wrong, and I want to see that guy go down. You know what I mean? And we started unpacking the actual truth of things. And I thought, what was hurt me so badly in that situation, or I wouldn't say it hurt me, but it struck me in that moment, was he unpacked what he did for a living. The guy works in one of the most difficult departments you can imagine. He works in working with abused children. And detectives and people that go in there, they don't usually last very long because it's just such a difficult thing to do. And it just breaks my heart that somebody actually has to be like sort of hiding from saying that he's a police officer in front of somebody when the dude should be applauded. The guy comes home and has to deal with the things that he deals with, and then he has to go out in the world and a good deal of the population just wants him dead, and thinks he's garbage, a garbage human, and that sort of thing. And it's the myopic nature of this movement. And I would say that the reason that we're seeing white nationalism sprouting up is because we only see what we're interested in. And that kind of comes to another point, the guy in the White House. If the people that were truly trying to go against him, or that has an opinion against him, or wanted him out, or just think he's a mess or whatever else, imagine what would happen if anybody that didn't want him in office just immediately unfollowed him on Twitter. Like literally millions of his followers were gone. And they no longer put their consciousness into his spewing. Because that's what he does. That's the nature of somebody who gets attention in that way, is they overload you with crazy, just whatever comes out of their mind. And then they have you squirreling about your day, needing to tell everybody, figure out the great response that you're going to do. And all it's doing is empowering what you don't want. And that's the interesting thing about the ego, is that it's an addiction to the story. If you want to be in the story, if you play the anti-racist, you're going to need racists. If you plan that you have this vision of interdependency with human beings, then you're probably going to find experiences with interdependency. Imagine if we all did that. The thing is we're so addicted, instead of trying to get over fears and that sort of thing, we just want to create reality from behind a computer screen. We want to, you could get just as much of a dopamine fix on, by going back and forth with somebody over minutia every single day. It's like, yes, we have a literal Simpsons caricature in the highest office in the land. I don't need to hear everything that caricature says. You know what I want to hear? Somebody come and tell me that he says something beautiful. He says something remarkably wise. That's news to me. Listening to somebody and putting my consciousness into somebody that has no, his thoughts don't have any basis to reality. Reality being, to me, would be an archetypal reality rather than a stereotyped reality. And that gives me another example of how this works, how the ego works. I mean, just the fact that confirmation bias is a thing should just tell us that we have an unconscious part of us, because we're looking for the world to fit the way that we want it to. So we go out and feed ourselves. Wow, it got dark. Oh, that was a trip. Feed ourselves with what we want to believe is true. That's absolutely us altering reality to make it fit us. So let me give you an example of that. And that's what I'm talking about, is these archetypal stories just keep playing out, but people are addicted to them and they stay in them because of fear. And entertainment value, because you just create your own drama. And they're always asking for people to, and that's the other thing. If you're anti-racist, you're probably going to be hanging out with people that are anti-racist, and their mindsets are going to be on racists, when the reality is they could be creating this other reality that's more beautiful, and then you're not actually giving attention to that other archetype. So there's a really good example that I've noticed of how our minds work. If you want, how I see the matrix now, how I see how archetypes just play with each other, and the ego it creates those archetypes for us. Because it's what we're doing is we bend reality, we bend archetypes, archetypal patterns that are just patterns of behavior. We bend them to fit our narrative, the narrative that we want to play out in our world. And a really good example of this is the Karen archetype. So the Karen archetype, and I don't even know if I could really describe it anymore. It's been so long, and it's been stereotyped. So people always say, the Karen stereotype. No. It started out as an archetype. It was a pattern of a woman's behavior, a specific kind of woman. And I remember it being described, and I was like, as long as you're describing a piece of, because you don't have to read Carl Jung to find out archetypes. If you see a pattern of behavior, as long as you're, witnessing the same behavior, it's an archetype. It's the moment that you twist it to make it fit. So when the Karen archetype started coming out, people started calling it a stereotype, which it was not, because it was just explaining a specific type of behavior of a specific person, and not necessarily named Karen, but there was that. And so what I've noticed over time is that the description that people used was now broadening. And what I mean by that, all of a sudden, no matter what a woman did, if somebody didn't like the behavior, whether it was the same behavior or not, they would call them a Karen. The moment you call them a Karen and it's not the same behavior, you've just stereotyped it. That is you literally taking the world to bend it to fit your narrative. It is literally the Matrix. Like these patterns just repeat. They just keep coming. And if you want to stay in them, that's your ride. You get to play in those stories that you can. I am not saying you should wake up. I'm saying if you wanted to wake up, I'm just sharing with you what the experience is. That I know for me, waking up was my goal. So it's not really a big surprise that I actually got to wake up in this lifetime. And I'm sure lots of people don't. They live out these very small, compact lives. And what I mean by that is their thoughts. They never allow their thoughts to get bigger because somebody told them they should be smaller. They told them stories that made them live in small patterns. But on the other side, they didn't have the courage to step out of that and stand up for themselves. And that's what I've learned. If there's two things that I've learned from waking up that was absolutely true. And if I had known that back when I was trying to wake up, I would have. And again, it's not about regret. I'm just saying that if I did my whole thing over again, it would be nice to focus on that fact. And the other part is to just encourage people to chase their dreams. And, and I've been using this idea that if you put, the fact is that if people, but the thing, sorry, let me get my thoughts together before I respond to this. I think I'm going to end it there. Nothing's coming through, and that thought whisked away. So this is an invitation. It's not when you get to this point, you realize that you really can't do anything to wake people up. They're going to wake up when they want to wake up. And then you would say, well, Jim, and I can imagine, that's the thing about having an open mind is you can surf different perspectives. And I'm talking to myself, an older version of myself that would have said, yeah, but Jim, why are you making this video? Why do this? You're on YouTube. Aren't you going to make money from doing this? And no, I'm not going to monetize this. Number one, because I'm practicing interdependency. And if there's any chance that you don't have to watch any kind of ads, I'll be happy. But they may stick them on top without paying me, which is fine. Because, the other reason is that my AdSense account was canceled. But that's not the point. The point is I'm practicing, my joy is to practice interdependency. My waking up was a lot of my waking up was based upon a mathematical, psychological formula that I followed that's so super simple, and it balances. Like, we're off, we're askew. So, there's narcissism where we think of ourselves before we think of others. And then we've got codependency where we think we got codependency where we think of others before self. Well, there's another state where you're in an equal term, where there's not an authority. You're both authorities, and it's called shared authority. When you're living an ego life, I found myself in different ways I was narcissistic, and other ways I was codependent. And our culture has decided that narcissists are horrible and codependents should be padded, I guess. They get all they're just as destructive force. They actually feed narcissism. That's why narcissism it can happen. But the point is that it was getting there that helped me get to this interdependent state. So when I sit with people I don't sit with people, and that's the interesting thing is I believe people feel, I make people feel like they're a genius, and it's not a mind trick, because that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the genius in them when I'm having a conversation with them. So I don't try to push my agenda on them. I look at them as an authority, and I also look at them as authority because in interdependency, if you don't take when I don't take an authoritative perspective, then when people are sharing, I can truly listen and go, oh my God, like that just built upon this idea that I had already worked out, and you just made it deeper. And I understand it better. Like everybody's a gift out there. So that's what I'm doing is I'm practicing. And it's not saying I'm practicing what I preach. It's what I discovered. It's my joy. It's my passion. I have so much fun empowering people with this information. So why wouldn't I do it? you know? And what I recognized is that speaking to people conceptually about interdependency and this formula is very difficult. It's very ambiguous. So what have I decided to do? I've decided to become a living example of it. I'm adjusting my life to practice interdependency. I'll give an example. Well, first, I'm not monetizing. I'm trusting that if I give people if I gift somebody a deep insight that moves them, they may feel called to gift to me in a gift exchange. And then I would ask people, when you do that, you figure out what the price is. Because I'm saying I'm practicing interdependency. Nobody practices interdependency that I know of. And I'm practicing it. So how can I practice it from my end with money? You know, I always was like, oh, I charge 80 or I'll suggest 80. It's like, no. If I'm practicing it, what I recognize is that in interdependency, it's a respect, and it's a gifting level, and it's a body experience. And that's why I use the terminology I use, because I use it so that people can feel as they're moving through it. So I want people to put numbers in their head, and then I want them to trust themselves. So in a gift exchange, it's, both people walk away feeling like a gifting just happened. And so what can I do in this situation is I will trust you, and that's what we have to do in interdependencies. We actually have to trust the other person. I have to trust myself 100%, and I need to trust the other person 100%. So what I'm offering from my side is 100%. I trust you 100%. And I'm not just trusting you, but I'm trusting the universe that this interaction can happen. And so that means if people don't give a dime, then I'm saying I'm 100% fine with that. And I'm good with it. And if you give $100 or whatever it is, I'm saying that whatever you give me is what I will take in value. And I'll give you another example that I've been practicing, and I'm loving it. So I just found myself with all this different stuff. Like I have an old Xbox, and I got some speakers, and I had a pair of old Jocos. And instead of trying to put them on Craigslist, get money, and then go buy something that I may want, I wanted to do the gift exchange thing. So I've got them up on Craigslist right now, and I just tell people, listen, I'm looking to barter. I'm at home. I want to play, and I want to be surprised. What you got? And so far, I've already come out with one trade, and he felt great about it. I feel great about it, and it's a gift. And I'm practiced that, and I started practicing the same thing. Like when I go out and if I see something on Craigslist and say it's $100, but I think I could feel comfortable at 70. I don't go to them and do a negotiation like it's just business. And I'm saying that's a wrong way to do it, but that's not the way I do it. Because I think in interdependency, everybody gets more out of it. Oh, that's my headlight. Sorry about that. So I'll say, would you feel comfortable at $70? And if they don't feel comfortable, then I feel fine if they turn it down. Like, I don't have to have some story. Oh, they should take my money and blah blah blah. It's no, whatever. You start seeing the perfection in life that some people are going to take, some people are going to give, and in all the end, we're all winners in that sense. So that's my reality. That's what I'm doing, and I'm sharing it with you. If you like it, cool. If you don't,